This morning we're in the book of Acts. We'll start in the book of Acts, chapter number 12. We're going to start another study. We've looked at grace, we've looked at judgments, we've looked at justice. Now I want to switch gears over to the afflicted. And we're going to be looking at the afflicted this morning. And then next time, Lord willing, we'll go over to afflictions, how to handle them, etc. So we want to look at the afflicted and our duty towards the afflicted. Our duty towards the afflicted. Acts chapter 12, and look down to verse number 5. Peter, therefore, was kept where? All right, that's no pleasant place to be. Had he broken any laws that he deserved to be there? No, just preaching the gospel. Herod had him locked up. So there he is in jail, in prison. But now notice this, but prayer was made how? Notice that, without ceasing, of the church unto God for him. Now that's very specific, the way that's worded, so that we'd get a handle on it. He says that prayer was made without ceasing of the church. Sometimes the church needs to begin to get more serious about prayers for the afflicted, for the oppressed, for those that are suffering for the cause of Christ. Now notice it says Peter was kept in prison. They wouldn't turn him loose. All right. But now I want you to see the rest of the story. Verse 6 says, and when Herod would have brought him forth the same night, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers. Now that's how serious they had a charge against him and how serious Herod was that he was going to take care of Peter. It says that he's sleeping between two soldiers and chained. Look at that. It says Peter was sleeping between two soldiers bound with two chains, one on each arm or one on each leg or something he was bound with, to each one of the soldiers. Now think about that. If you're going to be in jail, you're going to be in prison, and they've got you in a dungeon, that's bad enough. But now, not only are they serious about locking you in there, they're serious about keeping you in there because they put two jailers there and locked him to them. That's how serious this matter was. So you can tell the earnestness of what Herod was trying to do to him. You can tell that Herod had plans on killing Peter. But it's interesting, the prayers of worldly men, or the plans of worldly men, rarely come to fruition when it comes to the saints of God. Look what God does here. Verse 7, and behold, the angel of the Lord came upon him, and a light shined in the prison. And he smote Peter on the side and raised him up, saying, arise up quickly. And his chains fell off from his hands. Now notice that. That tells you where his chains were. All right? So the devil's fighting this, but the angel comes, and what does he do? He has to wake Peter up first, and then the chains fall off. Okay, that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Talk about a jailbreak. He didn't have to do anything, did he? He was just laying there sleeping. He knew he couldn't do anything. But God knew what he was going to do with Peter. Now notice this. And the angel said unto him, gird thyself and bind on thy sandals. And so he did. And he saith unto him, cast thy garment about thee and follow me. Here we go. So what happens? And he went out and followed him and wist not that it was true, which was done by the angel, but he thought he saw a vision. He was thinking he was seeing things or that he was dreaming. All right? And remember, he was dead asleep when this started. So here he is now. How would you do? You've been woke up in the middle of the night. All of a sudden, the angel slaps you on the side and says, hey, get up. And then all of a sudden the chains fall off and he tells you to get dressed. He gets dressed and out the door you start going. Now, how's that possible? Well, it's not possible with men because remember, there were guards outside and there were guards inside. And it says, and he went out and followed him. Verse 10, when they were past the first and the second ward, that means one guard on each door as they were going out. The first and the second ward, they came unto the iron gate that leadeth into the city, which opened to them of his own accord. In other words, it just flew right open. Now That's interesting, isn't it? No matter what kind of obstacle is in their way, look what's happening. God's taking care of it. He sent this angel to deliver Peter, and that angel was going to deliver Peter. That was his sole message. That was his sole duty, was to take Peter out of that prison. And as soon as he gets him out, look what happens. It says, and forthwith the angel departed from him. And when Peter was come to himself, all right, he's kind of, whoa, where am I? Look what I'm doing. Where am I at? I'm out here on the street. It says, he said, now I know of a surety that the Lord has sent his angel and hath delivered me out of the hand of Herod and from all the expectation of the people of the Jews, because he knew what was going to happen. He knew that the Jews were expecting a trial and a killing. That's what they wanted. And when he had considered the thing, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together. And what were they doing? Praying. And they were praying early. They were praying all night, because it says they were praying without ceasing. Now, this is in the middle of the night when Peter gets freed. So here they are, they've gathered together and they're having prayer service. And they're praying for Peter. Remember what that said? It said they were praying. Prayer was made without ceasing of the church unto God for him. All right, now back to the verse. It says, and as Peter knocked at the door of the gate, a damsel came to hearken named Rhoda. And when she heard Peter's voice, she opened not the gate for gladness, but ran in and told how Peter stood before the gate. She got happy, but she got to open the door. It said, and then they said unto her, thou art mad. That's calling somebody crazy. You're crazy. What you talking about, Peter? He's in jail. He's locked up. We know he's locked up. We went and visited him. He's chained between two men, and there's two men on the other side guarding him, and there's an iron gate. We can't get through. How's he loose? Then said they, it is his angel. Oh, it's Peter's angel. His guardian angels come pretending to be Peter. But Peter continued knocking, and when they had opened the door and saw him, notice this, they were astonished. Now, they shouldn't have been astonished. Why?
Well, they were praying.
They were praying. They knew that God could answer. They knew that God would answer, and they knew God had answered. They were just all taken aback. Here's Peter standing like he'd always been there. So our duty is to pray for those that are afflicted or being oppressed or going through persecution or trials. Our duty is to pray without ceasing for them. And then let me give you another one. Our duty is also to sympathize with them. Look at Romans and chapter number 12. Romans chapter 12. And go down to verse 15. Romans chapter 12, verse 15. Rejoice with them that do rejoice. That's important. Be happy for those that are being blessed. Be happy for those that are happy. Be glad for them that they're having a good time or a good day or a good hour or whatever. Be happy for them. But look at the other side of the coin too, that's always there. And weep with them that weep. In other words, we're supposed to feel empathy and compassion for those that are suffering under affliction, that are going through trials, hardships. Maybe they're going through a death and they're mourning the loss of their loved one. We should be touched with those same sympathies that they would have for us if we were going through the same situation. So our duty is to sympathize with them. Look now at the book of Job, chapter 6. Job, chapter 6. Now, another duty you'll find that we are responsible to do is to pity those that are in affliction. Job, chapter number 6. If anybody knew about affliction, who would it be? Or Job. Nobody has known such affliction as him other than our Lord. And in that way, he is a type of our Lord. But look here at chapter 6, and this is Job speaking here. And go down, if you will, to verse 14. Job 6 and 14. To him that is afflicted, what? Pity should be showed from who? his friends. But he forsaketh the fear of the Almighty. Now notice this. He should be getting sympathy from his friends. They should be getting pity from them. They should be coming together and helping him and encouraging him. Now what were these friends doing? They were stomping him while he's down. They were accusing him falsely of sin. Job had not sinned. In all these things, Job what? Sinned not. So Job had not sinned, yet here are his so-called friends singing around him, and for 3 days they only say nothing. They don't try to encourage him. They don't try to lift him up. They don't try to help him seek the Lord for answers as to what's going on. They just say, oh, Job, you've done this, or you've done that, or you're like this, you're like the wicked, and all these other things. So they begin, rather than helping, they're helping with the affliction. Isn't that something? To be found on the wrong side, helping the devil afflict the saints. That's what you're doing. If you're not pitying those that are going through afflictions, and you're actually belittling them and accusing them while they're down, you're in trouble because you're on the wrong side. Remember what happened to the 4 friends at the end. God was getting ready to judge them and slay them had it not been for Job's intercession for them. God told Job to pray for them and he'd forgive them. So think about that. We need to have pity for those that are suffering afflictions or going through these hardships and trials. Why? Because we could sooner or later be in the same thing, and we want others to help us. So we're to pity them. And then we're to keep them in our minds. Look over at Hebrews, if you will, chapter 13. Hebrews chapter 13. Hebrews chapter 13, and go down, if you will, to verse number 3. Hebrews 13 and verse 3. Remember them that are what? In bonds, as bound with them. See that? We should think of ourselves in bonds if we know somebody else that is in bonds for the Lord. We should be remembering them. One of the things about being imprisoned for the cause of Christ is people will tend to forget about you. There's a tendency for us out of sight, out of mind. We have that tendency to do that. We forget people are going through their troubles. But notice what this says again. It says, remember them that are in bonds as bound with them, and them which suffer adversity as being yourselves also in the body. You suffering adversity as well for them. So we need to remember those that are suffering and afflicted. And then there's another one. Look at 2 Corinthians, if you will. Chapter 1. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, and go down to verse 4. That is, not only remember them, but given the opportunity, we're to comfort them. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, starting in verse 4. Who comforteth us in all our what? Tribulation, that we may be able to comfort them which are in any trouble, by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted of God. Whereas the sufferings of Christ abound in us, so our consolation also aboundeth by Christ. And whether we be afflicted, it is for your consolation and salvation, which is effectual in the enduring of the same sufferings, which we also suffer. Or whether we be comforted, it is for your consolation and salvation. And our hope of you is steadfast, knowing that ye are partakers of the sufferings, so shall ye be also of the what? Consolation. So we're to comfort them. We're to be comforters to those that are going through the trials. We're to encourage them. We're to hold them up, those that are weakened by distress, by afflictions, by persecutions. We're to try to hold them up and encourage them, to help them, to give them consolation, to help relieve them of their suffering by being there for them. One of the things about being president is you're separated from everybody. You can't get to the church, or you can't get to the prayer meeting, or you can't ask others for prayer because you're locked up. And there are many at this very moment locked up for the cause of Christ in foreign lands. There are many of our missionaries being persecuted for trying to preach the gospel in difficult places. There are many that are suffering. There are many that are having hardships, and we need to remember to keep them on our minds and to comfort them when we can. Now, another part of that comforting is to relieve them. Look at Philippians, if you will. Philippians chapter 4. Chapter 4. And I want you to look at verse 13 first. This is a famous quote. Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through who? Christ, which strengtheneth me. I can do all things. Well, what's that mean? Is there anything that doth hinder me from doing anything Christ would have me do? No. We can do all things. But now look what he says in verse 14. Notwithstanding, ye have done well that ye did communicate with my affliction. Now notice this. Paul was in jail for preaching the gospel. And a love offering was taken up for him, because when you're in jail, the only thing you get is bread and water. If you want food, if you want vegetables, if you need medicine, if you need anything, the outside people could try to send it in to you. There's no guarantee you'd get it, but they could try to send it to you. And Paul got these offerings from the church, and he says, ye did communicate with my affliction. You helped me. You helped me with the persecution that I'm going through by providing whatever it was that you provided. And I say it was probably some offerings so that he could have some food occasionally, so that he could have some medicine occasionally, so that he could be relieved while he was there suffering for the cause of Christ. And then another verse that's good for that too, just turn right one book and go over to, or two, go over to 1 Timothy and go to chapter 5 and go to verse 10. 1 Timothy 5:10. Well reported of for good works. Speaking of a widow now. Have brought up children, if she have lodged strangers, if she have washed the saints' feet, if she has what? Relieved the afflicted. Now, sometimes if you're a widow, what's going to be the problem with helping people? You don't have a whole lot, do you? But remember, a widow can still be effective by trying to help with little things. I mean, maybe a casserole, or maybe a handkerchief, or maybe just a prayer, or maybe coming just to visit. Little things can make a difference in somebody that is under affliction. So little things can make a difference. Even this widow, it says, if she's like this, receive her into the church. Notice the rest of the verse. It says, if she have relieved the afflicted, if she have diligently followed every good work. But the younger widows refuse. So we're to relieve the afflicted. And then go over to the book of Psalms. And I got one more for you. Psalms 82. Psalm 82. Go down to verse 3. Defend the poor and the fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and needy. Now that idea of justice means their cause needs to be taken up for them. Sometimes you can't get to court because you're too poor. You can't get in. Back then it was hard to get in if you were poor. The kings and the princes usually liked a little side money in order to consider your case. If you were poor, they just put you to the back of the line, put you to the back of the line, put you to the back of the line. And it wasn't fair So what David or Asaph here is saying, he says, defend the poor and fatherless, do justice to the afflicted and needy, deliver the poor and the needy, rid them out of the hand of the wicked. See, sometimes we get snared by the wicked one. And we need to be able to help those that are snared, those that are downtrodden, those that have fallen to temptation, those that are giving in to the things of the world. We need to try to help them. Not stomp them while they're down, but try to encourage them, help them to pick them back up and to bring them back into the fold. So we're to protect them. And then here's another one in Proverbs. Look at it. Proverbs 22. Go right one book. Proverbs 22. And look at verse 22. Proverbs 22, verse 22. Rob not the poor, because he is poor. Neither oppress the afflicted in the gates. Now, sometimes back in the day, if you didn't have an income, like you were a leper, or if you were unhealthy, like you're paralyzed or you're deformed or some type of health problem, the only thing you could do is sit in the gate and have your little cup out and ask for alms. Now, a lot of people just kind of turn their heads and go on by. And then some people would take and whip them out of the gates to get rid of them so that they didn't have to see them. They didn't want to see people suffering and afflicted. That's cruel, isn't it? That's oppressing somebody that's afflicted. But what does it say? Rob not the poor because he is poor, neither oppress the afflicted in the gate. It reminds me of Lazarus the beggar. Remember him? What gate did he sit in? The gate of the rich man's house. And boy, don't you know that rich man probably tried every way in the world to get rid of him, short of giving him food. But you see, Lazarus ended up in the bosom of Abraham in heaven. And where did that rich man end up? In hell. He lifted up his eyes, being in torments. So we're to try to protect them. There's one more verse, 31, Proverbs 31, verse 5. Lest they drink and forget the law, speaking of kings and princes, and forget the law and pervert the judgment of any of the afflicted. Many times leaders get full of themselves, they get full of the spirits, they get full of everything except for the spirit that they need to have, and that is the Holy Spirit. And they began slacking in their duties. And their duty as a king was to help judge the poor and the oppressed and to relieve the afflicted with their burdens. But a lot of times they would negate that by being drunk in their positions of power. They would forget to do justice. They would forget to do judgments in the right way to help the cause of the needy. A lot of times it was the widows and the orphans that would be taken advantage of. A lot of times the buzzards, as it were, would be circling around them. And they'd be just looking for an opportunity to take something from them, especially their land, so that they could take their land and profit by it. And that would be a cause that a widow or an orphan would have to come to the prince and say, look, I'm poor, I'm an orphan, I don't have anything or anybody, and here they are taking the land that my daddy left me, and I don't have any resources to defend myself. Can you help me? And they'll say, I'm drunk, go away. Don't want to hear you. I'm not going to hear your case. And you can imagine over the years and the years and the years of how long that's been going on, and how long these leaders and these judges have been going and afflicting the poor just by not doing their jobs. Remember, Jesus even gave a parallel, and he said, it's like the widow woman that had a cause, and she went to this judge, and she went to the judge, and she went to the judge, and she went to the judge, and finally he wore down and says, I've got to get rid of this woman. I'm going to have to hear her case so I can keep her from pestering me. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, of course. But you see, she was persistent. And sometimes we have to be persistent for our own afflictions, but we need to be persistent as well for others that are going through the same thing. Just because it's legal to have an abortion doesn't mean we shouldn't be persistent in trying to stop it. We need to be persistent in helping those and protecting those that don't have protection. The unborn can't be protected from a woman that decides to kill them. We need to help intervene in that process and try to do away with abortions. And we stand a good chance. We stand a good chance of doing away with that abortion law that they've come up with. And boy, the left ain't liking that. They're hating it, and they're raising all kinds of Cain. But nonetheless, we need to continue. Even if we lose that case in the Supreme Court, we need to continue to try to stand for those that are afflicted, those that are oppressed. Even the unborn are afflicted and oppressed now in the day and age in which we live. So the duty for all these things, to pray, to sympathize, to pity, to bear in mind, to comfort, to relieve, and to protect the afflicted ones. And next time we'll look and begin to look at afflictions. So think about that today. Let's all stand. We'll close with the word of prayer and we'll be dismissed.